The Dutch Grand Prix has been ticked off the calendar for 2022, and here are my 3 winners and 3 losers from the Dutch Grand Prix weekend. And well, my first winner is no surprise really, it's home Grand Prix. It has to be Max Verstappen. Now, I'm not going to dwell on the race winner for too long because he seems to be in our winners category effectively every single weekend, and how can you blame me really when he is absolutely on fire right now in 2022? Another pole converted into another victory and in front of his home crowd too. He just looked great value for the win again, with both Ferraris not turning up when it came to Sunday. And then when there was even an inkling of a battle between him and last year's title rival Lewis Hamilton, the safety car came out just in time for the Dutchman, just as he was about to pit anyway, and from that point it turned into a very easy win. And that's why I think Lewis Hamilton also has to go down as our first loser from this Grand Prix weekend. It just fell apart all of a sudden for the 7-time world champion, from possible win to off the podium in very few laps. And this might be a little bit harsh considering where Mercedes have been this season, but the race pace from the Mercedes this weekend was absolutely exceptional. And I think we have to obviously take into account that this track does suit the philosophy that Mercedes are working with this new aerodynamic package, but still they turned up and were absolutely sublime. Also, the strategy call from Mercedes off the start to go for the one-stop strategy, to see how well the hard tyres were working for Fernando Alonso and just commit to that, was an absolutely great call. And it set up for this battle at the end where Lewis Hamilton would have had track position, Max Verstappen would have had the fresher tyres, and either of them could have come out on top. We even got to see some fastest laps from Lewis Hamilton and George Russell during the middle of the Grand Prix, which was just another reminder, I think, to those teams in and around them, how quick they can be when they do get things right and when they are able to push their philosophy to its absolute limit, maybe giving us an inkling at what they can do in 2023 as well. Then came the virtual safety car and the full safety car, and because Hamilton was at the lead of the Grand Prix at this point, everyone else could be reactive to the Mercedes, and it just didn't play the way Lewis Hamilton needed. Mercedes played it safe, and unfortunately the medium compound tyre just left Lewis Hamilton a sitting duck in the end because of those warm-up issues that Mercedes do have. I think the real kick in the teeth for Lewis Hamilton this weekend, though, was not that Max Verstappen got past, as I think he probably would have done anyway, but that George Russell and Charles Leclerc were able to get past him as well, meaning Lewis Hamilton finished in 4th place and finished outside the podium positions for the first time since Canada. And it was that thing again in Formula 1 of how difficult it is actually to be at the front of the pack when it comes to a virtual safety car or a safety car, because everyone else can be reactive to you. Mercedes took a risk and it didn't pay off. Whereas I'm going to argue his teammate George Russell is our next winner from this Grand Prix weekend, because he was behind Lewis Hamilton, was able to change onto the soft compound tyres in reaction to Hamilton staying out, and picked up a 2nd place because of it. Many are arguing that George Russell should have stayed out because actually that would have given Mercedes a better opportunity at winning the Grand Prix, as Max Verstappen would have had to have overtaken both Mercedes cars after the safety car. And this would have given Lewis Hamilton just that little bit of extra time to possibly warm up those tyres in preparation for the attack from Max Verstappen. But George Russell saw that he was going to be vulnerable and went for a strategy that he thought would get him the best finish possible. And you can argue that he was a little bit selfish, but it worked in his favour. He picked up a 2nd place finish and finished ahead of both of the Ferraris, which is fundamental when it comes to the Constructors' Championship. George Russell has been so incredibly consistent over the course of the Grand Prix this year, and you have to hand it to Merc. More often than not, when it comes to strategy, when it comes to reliability, they've been absolutely exceptional. They're just missing that half a percentage point of pace every single weekend that would take them up to that next level. Overall, though, for Mercedes, even though I've got Lewis Hamilton in our losers category and George Russell in our winners category, I think it would be a massive boost for the team. And I think it's another reminder of how good this team can be if they get everything right. And I'll say it once, I'll say it again. If they can sneak a victory in 2022, they will carry so much incredible momentum into 2023. It's immense. Which is not great if you're a Ferrari fan. And this weekend in particular, it was a very tough weekend for Carlos Sainz fans out there. That's why I think he goes down as our next loser. It was another weekend of 2 halves when it came to Ferrari, and unfortunately it fell on the Saturday again, where they looked so much better than they did on the Sunday. Actually, both Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz were within a 10th of Max Verstappen's pole position time on the Saturday, and in my opinion, Carlos Sainz has looked better and better and better as the season has progressed. But this weekend was another reminder that the Ferrari team just have to have something going wrong in the background. You can't have so many weekends with mistakes for this to be a coincidence. And it was Carlos Sainz whose race was dramatically impacted this time around. Comes in for his first stop on lap 15 of the Grand Prix, and his rear left tyre is just nowhere to be seen. 3 out of 4 tyres just doesn't quite make the cut in Formula 1. Ferrari pit crew then left bemused and looking around for what felt like an age. Their tyre gun got run over. They finally got the tyre to the carb after a 12-second stop. That is just not what you want as Carlos Sainz. And it seems like the guy who was supposed to be putting the tyre on went to the front of the car for some reason, then realised he was in the wrong place, had to go back and get the tyre. It just all fell apart. Then it was always going to be an uphill battle for the Spaniard, having to make your way through that midfield pack, your Lando Norrises, your Alpines, on a track where it's very difficult to overtake as well. It was always going to cost him an incredible amount of time. And then, of course, there's the incident where he tries to get past Esteban Ocon, even though Valtteri Bottas's car has stopped on the right side of the track. There's yellow flags being waved. It all fell apart for Carlos Sainz, and an 8th place finish in the end from 3rd on the grid. Ouch. But mentioning that midfield pack that Carlos Sainz was trying to make his way through does lead quite nicely to my next winners. And it might be a bit of a cop-out because I'm putting both drivers that finished ahead of Carlos Sainz in. It's Lando Norris and Fernando Alonso. Both of them have been kings of the midfield pack throughout the entire season for me. I genuinely think if Fernando Alonso hadn't been so unlucky over the course of the first 4 or 5 races this season, the battle that they would be having for that best of the rest 7th place in the Drivers' Championship would be so close. I would argue that both of them have been in my top 5 drivers this year so far, and the fact that they're just keeping up this level of performance, this relentlessness every single time around is so impressive. I know Alonso is off to Aston Martin next year, but I really hope that they can give him a car on the level of this year's Alpine, because he deserves to be right at the top of the midfield pack week after week, battling with the likes of Lando Norris and Esteban Ocon. And the fact that those 3 are going to be in 3 different teams next year really excites me. On top of that, if I was Oscar Piastri, I would actually be a little bit worried because the comparisons with Norris will be coming and the standard has been set incredibly high by the Briton. That midfield pack for 2023 looks set up to be absolutely fireworks every single weekend. And I know that we've still got some gaps to fill on the grid, but I am already excited to see who can come out in 4th place next season. And one of those gaps on the grid might be left by my final loser from this weekend's Grand Prix. Of course, it has to be Yuki Tsunoda. And it looked like it could have been such a good weekend for the Japanese driver in a season that started so well for him. I don't think many would argue with me when I say it's definitely slowed down over the last few Grand Prix weekends. He needed something to just re-kickstart his season. Qualifying in the top 10 for just the 4th time this season felt like he was pushing in the right direction. Even after a poor start, there was still hope that Yuki Tsunoda might be able to just turn around this weekend and get that much needed performance. Then came the chaos. And I'm going to read this because it gets very complicated very quickly and I don't want to get it wrong. So accelerating out of the pit lane, Yuki Tsunoda thinks he's about to lose a wheel. He comes to a stop and starts to undo his belts, but the team inform him that the wheels are in fact properly fitted, so he needs to continue. Just to check over the car, he comes into the pit, fixes his belts, fits new tyres. After leaving the pit lane again, he says there's still an issue with the car, and we now know that it was the differential on the AlphaTauri. So his engineer informs him to finish exiting the pit lane and stop in a safe place somewhere on track. Now, some people think AlphaTauri did this on purpose. They're wrong, because obviously you can't just cause damage to your differential whenever you fancy during a Grand Prix. But it did cause absolute chaos for a couple of laps, which was very entertaining to watch. Which does lead me quite nicely to my honourable mentions for this weekend's winners and losers. I think we have to give a W to Lance Stroll. Had a great weekend, qualified in the top 10. Could have probably been 8th, maybe even 7th in qualifying, and picked up a point on Sunday as well. Whereas it is definitely an L for his teammate Sebastian Vettel for messing up in qualifying so badly, coming in 19th, and then driving so incredibly slow under blue flag conditions. I would say it's also an L for Alfa Romeo, who looked nowhere near the team they did. Another DNF for Valtteri Bottas too. That's 2 weekends in a row that Valtteri Bottas hasn't finished the Grand Prix, and then Joe finished miles outside the points. And unfortunately an L for Mick Schumacher after a great qualifying performance, a really poor race. And when the pressure is on, he needs some performances. He can't have 3 great Grand Prix over 2 seasons and keep his seat in Formula 1. That does round up my winners and losers from the Netherlands Grand Prix. I'd love to know your winners and losers in the comments down below. Who have I missed out? Who should I have mentioned in this weekend's winners and losers? Whilst you're down there, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and I will see you next time.
Well done, Max.
Yes! Oh, they threw everything at us, but we made the right call, so very lovely result out, guys.
Well done, mate. That was a mega drive.